Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I am from AzureAutomation.com and welcome to the next part of our Weekend with Docker video that we were discussing in our last video. So this is a two-part videos and we are going to complete this particular Weekend with Docker discussion in this video itself. So in our last video, we discussed about the introduction to Docker, understanding the basic of Docker, understanding Docker for Linux, Windows and NCOW, and setting the stage ready by installing the Docker, putting the first Docker image, running the Docker image, and understanding the Docker volumes and exploring the Docker volumes with toolings and stuff. And in this video, we are going to talk about creating and running our own Docker images with .NET Core apps, using tools for creating Dockerfile, creating and running our own Docker image for .NET Core app for Multistage, and also we'll see the other stuff related to deploying the application to the Docker container, and finally we'll conclude our two-part series that we were talking about. Alright, so let's get started. The power of Docker is it runs on every machine as it is, so there is no more run on my machines and not in your machine problem. If you remember, almost all the times we always, as a QA or a developer, we say that this particular code runs in my machine but not in your machine, which is kind of a very legacy way of saying that, but not anymore, because Docker has really covered up a lot, because whatever container that you create is going to be pretty much exactly the same way it's going to run on that container through another container that you're going to be creating and running it. That's the power of the whole image itself. And in this part, we are going to talk a lot about the developmental activities, so that you need to be a little more hands-on with the understanding of Visual Studios and how the code is actually been written in C#.NET and ASP.NET. Those things we're not going to be understanding in this particular video at least, but we are going to be discussing about that. So let's get ready, folks. We are going to talk about a lot in the programming world this time. So let's get ready, folks. We are not just going to talk about the provisioning stuff. We're also going to do coding in this particular part. So code for life is something which I really appreciate, because coding is what makes the developer and tester to do a lot of jobs much easier and much simpler way to a complex problem. And because we as a QA engineer need to know how the Docker works and how to provision the application, we also need to know how the behind the scene application actually works in Docker container. And that's exactly we'll be covering in this particular video, and we'll see how Docker has really simplified the way of deploying the application. So before starting to write some code, at least in this case, we are going to work with the ASP.NET Core. So we need to have some prerequisite software to be available within our own machine, so that we can start or follow along with this particular video. So the software prerequisite that we are going to need in this particular demonstration is the Visual Studio 2019 or VS Code editor within your machine installed, because only then you can really follow along the video and make a benefit out of whatever discussion that we are doing right now. So Visual Studio 2019 or VS Code is something that you really require to be installed within your machine. So once you have installed these prerequisite software, we are then going to create a Docker image. And in this demo, we will see how we can create a Docker file and use it for building, compiling and creating an image, making it as a Docker image. And then we can also see how we can create a single stage Docker file. We can also see some of the tooling options. So the single stage Docker file is going to look something like this. As you can see in here, we have a from mcr.microsoft.com/.net/core/asp.net ASP.NET colon 3.0 buster slim. So the from mcr.microsoft.com is nothing but the container registry. So we are going to pull everything from the container registry, which is nothing but the mcr.microsoft.com. And within this registry, this ASP.NET Docker image is actually been sitting under this path. And there is a colon of 3.0 buster slim, which is nothing but this is actually a tag for this particular ASP.NET image. So there can be a new version of ASP.NET, let's say 3.5. So it's going to be 3.5 tag in there. But even if you want to still use your legacy system with 3.0, you can still use it based on that tag. So that's the power of tag itself. And we discussed about that in our earlier video. Not a lot, at least a little bit. And then we need to create a working directory of our application that we are about to work with. So that's the /app in here. And then we're going to copy some of the files which we are going to be building, and then we're going to publishing it. So we're going to copy all the published file from the application from the path /app/publish of this dot. So this dot basically indicates that the current path where the Docker file is actually sitting. So it's going to copy all these files from this working directory, and then it's going to create an entry point of the .NET and the DLL file, which is going to be something the container going to be executing while we start running the image. So this is how you can create a single stage Docker file in Docker. So this is very, very important concepts, guys. It's very, very easy to understand, and you can see that there is no jargons or syntax really is. It's all pretty simple and straightforward. All we have to do is just follow some of the pattern of how to write them. So this is the creation of a single stage Docker file. And in the meantime, as you can see, we are doing a copy of the publish file. Basically, we are going to be building and publishing an ASP.NET Core app using the commands something like this. And as you can see, the .NET build of ASP.NET, ASP.core.fsproj -c of the release, -o of the path where I'm going to build the application. And then we need to then release this application using the publish command of the .NET, which is nothing but the .NET publish ASP.core.fsproj -c release -o /app/publish. So this is the place where the application is going to sit. Maybe the slash is not required. It's just app/publish. So once you publish this, you can then use the Dockerfile to actually create a Docker image and run that. So this is how you can work with a single stage Docker file. But as you can see that we are calling the other two commands from a command line, and then we are going to call this particular single stage Docker file to make things happen. But what if I want to make even this particular command, like these two, to be available within my Docker file itself? So in order to do that, we are going to use what is called as a multi-stage Docker file. So this multi-stage Docker file is going to look something like this. As you can see, we are going to create a base container image, and there we are going to create one more image, which is going to be called as a build, and then we're going to create one more image, which is going to be called as publish, and after that we are going to be finally creating one more image, which is nothing but the final image, which is going to actually hold whatever that we did even earlier. But you can wonder, like, what if these three images is going to sit? Basically not. These images are not going to be sitting within your Docker images. Just this particular image is going to sit within your Docker images. Basically, these are like a layers where you can probably work through while you are going to build your application. So basically, it will also eradicate the dependency problem within your machine. So we'll talk about this multi-stage Docker file in even more detail while we start working with it once we are done with a single stage Docker file. So don't worry about it yet a lot. So let's quickly see everything in action that we have discussed so far in this slide and understand how things work. So for that, I'm going to flip to my Windows 10 operating system. So in this video, we are going to be creating an ASP.NET Core application, and then we're going to run that in a container. So basically, we're going to build a container image, and then we are going to run that container image within the Docker, and we'll see how we can access the application from within the container, which is running using the Docker. So in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way to the Docker Hub, and I'm going to search for the ASP.NET. So you can see there are so many results coming in for the ASP.NET Core. So I'm just going to select that, and you can see that this is updated like 6 months ago. So make sure that any updates that you see in here like 6 months ago, which means it's kind of deprecated. So you can see there is a notice saying it's a deprecated, and it says these images have deprecated because ASP.NET Core 1.0, 1.1, 2.0 are no longer supported by Microsoft. So it's always a better idea that we take the latest and the greatest version of the images from Microsoft or somewhere which the Docker images are actually sitting. So you can see that the ASP.NET Core version is now available in this particular path. So I'm just going to go to this link, and you can see that we get this ASP.NET Core runtime over here. So you can see that I'm just going to take the runtime this time, not the complete SDK itself. So for instance, if you have an SDK already within your machine, then it's no problem, because I have Visual Studio 2019 installed within my machine, so I should have the SDK already installed as well. But if you don't really have any SDK, then probably you should be doing that as well as a part of the container image. If not, you're going to be getting some sort of error. So I'm just going to take the runtime in here, which should be more than enough for me. And you can see this is the path of getting the particular container. And you can see this is how you can actually pull the container image. So I'm just going to copy. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to open the PowerShell. I'm going to run this as administrator. And then I'm going to install or pull the ASP.NET Core image. I guess I already have this particular version of ASP.NET Core. So if I just do a Docker images just to save our time of the demonstration, I already did that before. You can see that this guy is actually sitting in the 3.0 Buster Slim of this one. So it's exactly the same thing that I just showed you. So I already have that, so I don't really have to worry about downloading or pulling this particular image within my machine. So I don't really have to go through this particular process once again, but you should be for sure doing that. So make sure you do that. So once you have that, you can then start this particular image. So basically there is no point in starting this particular image unless until you really use it. So in order to use this particular image, what I'm going to do is I already have an application which is sitting within my C colon, but I'm not going to show you how to create this project and stuff. We'll be discussing about that later in this video. But as of now, just to demonstrate the single stage Dockerfile, I'm just going to use the direct way of creating a Docker files and stuff. So I'm just going to in more right now. And you can see that I already have something called as a Docker file. So if I open this within Visual Studio Code, you can see that I get the one which we just saw in the slide there. So it has the from Microsoft mcr.microsoft.com/.net/core ASP.NET 3.0 Buster Slim, and there is this working directory, just nothing but the /app. So you can see that this particular Docker file is actually sitting in here. That's why I'm going to take the /app as a working directory. Which is this one, and then the copy the file from the /app/publish. So basically if you have any file being published, which is going to be coming from in here. So basically what I can do is I'm just going to delete this particular folder because we are going to generate this ourselves. So let's do that. And this is the entry point as we discussed in the slide. So now I need to execute this particular Docker file, and I'm going to see how to actually create our own image. So for doing that, I need to first build the application and publish the particular application, and only then we need to create the image. But even before doing that, as you can see within my Docker images, I already have the ASP core application or the image, which is something I created like 2 hours before just to try out and see how it actually works. So I need to remove this guy because it is not something I really require. So in order to remove that, I'm just going to do this Docker image of rm of ASP core, or maybe I need to give the image ID, but not the name. So I'm just going to remove the image ID. It seems like it is kind of running right now. I just can see the Docker ps-a, and it seems like this application is kind of up and running right now. So I need to somehow stop this. So Docker stop this container ID. There you go, it got stopped. And now if I do a ps here, it seems like it's exited. So now if I just try to remove this particular container, or maybe -f, and you can see that it is deleted right now. So now if I just do a Docker images, you can see that the ASP core image is now deleted. So this is how we can delete the particular image. We need to stop the existingly running container before you actually remove or delete that particular image. So now you could see that we have exercised some more command this time in order to delete an image. And now I'm going to first time create our own image by first of all running the particular application within a Docker container. So in order to do that, as I said before, we need to first publish the application, or we need to first build the application, and then we need to publish the application and create a container image. So in order to do that, you can see that this is the application name. It's nothing but the ASP core fs proj. So I'm just gonna copy this, and then I'm gonna say -c of release of -o of app/build. So you can see that it is building the application by restoring the NuGet packages and stuff. So you can see that this particular folder has been created, which means it is kind of building it right now. And we also need to do a release. So these are something pretty much exactly related to the .NET world. So I'm just going to do that. So I need to do a publish, not the release, sorry. There you go. And now it has been published as well. So now if I go to the app and the build, you can see that our application, the ASP.NET Core application, is kind of available. So now in order to build this particular application within a container image, all I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of our Dockerfile this time. So this particular Dockerfile is sitting within my own local path, which is nothing but this one. So all I'm going to do is I need to run the particular docker build command to build an image, and then I can actually do a docker run command to run the image and see how it actually works. So the build command is the new one that we have never discussed in our previous video, and we are going to be using in this particular video. So let's start building our Docker image itself. So I'm going to say docker build, or maybe I'm going to clear the screen so that you can have even more clear understanding here. Docker build. I'm going to tag or give a name for this particular application that I'm going to be running. So basically, I'm going to say the name of the container as an ASP.NET Core app, and then I'm going to hit a dot, which is nothing but the local file. So basically, Docker knows that if you're going to do a Docker build, the Docker will eventually look for a file called as a Dockerfile. But if you're going to specify this particular command in any other file name, something like Dockerfile -1 or -2, then you need to specify the file name by -f to specify the exact Dockerfile name. By default, Docker is going to look for the Dockerfile if you just do a Docker build. So I'm just going to hit enter, and you see that you get an error here, and it says that the repository name must be in the lowercase and see the Docker build help. So I have given the capital letter here, and then you will get this particular error. So basically, you should not use the capital letter while you create the repository name, which is nothing but the image name. So I'm just going to say ASP.NET Core, which is fine. I guess this is good. And then I'm going to hit enter. So you can see that now it will start building the image for us. And it has got failed, which is kind of crazy. Let me go and see within this particular app. I don't see the publish folder in here. I don't know why. So let me see what command that I executed before. I did not change the path name. So I just did a build, but I did not did the path name change for the publish itself. So let me do the build once again. And let me do the publish, which is something I need to do, something like a publish here. And I also need to change this to, I'm going to hit enter. There you go. Now let me go and check this folder. There you go. Now we have a publish folder, and we have the whole application sitting, which is cool. So now if I just do this particular docker build -t ASP.NET Core app, hit dot, and you can see that it has now created a Docker image for us. You can see that it is pretty fast in my machine, and it may be very, very slow in your machine. The reason being, the step one, which is nothing but the from mcr.microsoft.com/.net/core/asp, this one is actually downloaded within my Docker of this machine, and that's the reason it is pretty fast, which is nothing but the size is almost like 210 MB or something like that. And because it is already available, it is pretty fast and everything is going very faster in my case, but it may be slower in your case. So make sure if you have already downloaded that, this problem would not have occurred to you. So now if I just do a Docker images, you can see that I now have what is called as an ASP.NET Core app image within my machine. And this is created like 53 seconds ago, which is nothing but the one which I have created. And you can see this time, and that's the power of Docker itself, guys. You can see the size of this particular ASP.NET Core app image is actually shown as 211 MB, but actually we are using the base image of the ASP.NET Core of this one, which is 207 MB. So basically the size of this particular image will not be 211 MB. So it's actually like a layer of the same image that you are seeing in here, just that this particular application is being added on the top. So the size will be almost 4 MB or something like that. So that's the maximum size of this image, but here it shows you the size as 211 MB. The reason being, it actually is using this particular image on the top. That's why the size is shown as this, right? So now I need to run this particular image and see how it works. So for that, I'm just going to do a Docker run. It's the same command that we discussed in our earlier videos. And then I'm going to do an -d in a detached mode. I'm just going to run this particular application. And again, the detached mode is something which we have not discussed in our earlier video. This is the one which you can actually do, which is -d. So with the detached mode, you mean that don't throw me any message interactively within this particular console, just show me how it is going. So I'm just going to set it to -d. And we used -it in our earlier video. So these are the two ways that you can run. And now the port number we have to specify. So the application actually exposes the port number 80, and we need to expose that to our local machine to 8080, right? So this is the one, and then I'm gonna give a name this time. So this is new as well. So we have never give any name to our container, and this time we're gonna give a container name. So if you remember earlier, if you want to delete a container, we use the container ID. So what if we want to give a name to a container? So we can give a name to the container, something like --name, and then we can call the container using its name. So I'm going to call this as local ASP core, or maybe it's a weather app, and I'm going to run the image, which is nothing but the image that we just created, which is nothing but the ASP.NET Core app. And then I'm going to hit enter, and you can see that it just gave me an ID in here, and it started running that container. So now if I just go to the Docker PS and hit enter, you can see that I now have an image with this particular name just running for this particular container, and the name of this particular container is actually weather app, which is pretty cool. And now you can see there is a port mapping happened as well. So now if I just go to the local host of 8080, right, so this is going to be the weather app. So I'm just going to give the weather forecast. I'm going to hit enter, and you can see that this particular application is up and running. So basically the name of the application is weather forecast, and it shows you the weather forecast of the current. So now you can see that this is basically running this particular application in a container, and you can see how the response is actually coming. So with this, we can see that we can work with the single stage Dockerfile much easily using these commands. But the next thing that we're going to discuss is actually the toolings option of creating this Dockerfile, and how we actually can work with these kinds of Dockerfile if we don't really have any knowledge on the Dockerfile itself. So we are going to see the tricks and understand how we can actually work with it. So in order to work with this particular trick of working with the Dockerfile itself, there are so many different toolings available on the internet to work with, where you can even copy paste some of the Dockerfile information directly from some other Dockerfile and create your own way of doing it. So as you can see, now you know how to build an ASP.NET Core application using these commands much easier. You're going to do exactly the same thing with even other projects as well, but just that you're going to mix and match the command a little bit and you can make use of those things. But you don't even have to worry about all these problems these days. The reason being, now you actually have what is called as a Visual Studio, which does all those jobs for you. For instance, if you're going to create a new project in Visual Studio, so I'm going to open the Visual Studio in here and I will show you how it actually looks like. So this is the new Visual Studio 2019. I'm going to create a new project, and this time I'm going to choose the ASP.NET Core application, and I'm going to hit next. I'm going to call this as ASP.NET Core Docker app. I'm going to hit create, and you can see that it's going to bring me up a template to choose. So I'm going to choose the API, or you can also get the additional project templates if you want to. For instance, if you're going to require some other templates that you are looking for, you can choose that as well, which I'm not going to be doing at least for this particular video, but I'm just going to use this particular API project. And you can see we now have an option of enable Docker support. So this requires a Docker desktop, and we already know that I already have this particular Docker desktop running within my machine. So this particular stuff is also being checked. And you can choose whether you're going to go with the Docker for Windows or Linux in this case. So I'm just going to leave this as Linux as it is, and then I'm going to hit create. So once I create this, this is going to create a project for me, and at the same time this particular project is also going to add the Docker files and stuff for me. So you can see that once I create it, it's actually running a Docker image for me behind the scene, which is pretty awesome. So it created a Docker desktop. It checks whether the Docker desktop is being installed, and then it's verifying the Docker desktop is running, and then it also verifying the Docker OS, and it's missing any of the missing images. And in our case, we already have the particular image which is looking for, so it actually is okay with that. And it also exposing the port to 8080, and it's removing the intermediary containers and stuff. So where is these things are actually running right now while we just created a single project? So if you just go all the way to the Solution Explorer, you can see we now have something called as a Docker file. And this is the Docker file I was talking about, guys. This file actually has all the information that you're looking for. And as you can see, it has a from Microsoft NetCore Buster Slim as the base image, and it's going to choose the working directory, expose the port, expose another port 443 as well. So it automatically set all the values for us. And because we're going to do a build, as we did in our earlier discussion, I'm going to do a build in here with a different image this time. And as you can see, it is actually looking for a Microsoft NetCore SDK of 3.0 Buster. So this is an ASP.NET Core 3.0 Buster Slim, whereas this is an SDK itself. So it's basically getting an SDK, and then it's going to create a working directory, and then it's going to copy the particular project into this particular folder location, and then it's going to run a .NET restore, and again it's going to copy that particular file, and then it's going to set the working directory this time in a different location so that it can do another run for the build. So basically this is the restore and this is the build operation happening. So once the restore and build is done, the next operation is the publish option, which is also done. And finally, this is the exact same command that we used for our single stage container, as you are very, very familiar with, but just that this time the copy is from the publish, which is nothing but this one. So this is how the multi-stage Docker file is being created, and that's why while it actually executed the Docker file for us, as you can see in the output, you can see there are many different steps coming in to perform the same operation. So now if I just go to our Docker images, you can see that it also created an ASP.NET Core Docker app, which is nothing but the application that we just created, this one. So automatically the image is now sitting in here, and the size is actually this 207 MB, which is pretty much exactly the same size of this particular ASP.NET Core, right? Which means now it is pretty much ready for us to even execute this particular .NET Core application within Visual Studio 2019. So now if I go over here, you can see that we now have something called as a Docker option. So you can not only just execute this in IIS, rather you can even execute this directly in the Docker. So once I run this one, I guess it will execute. It says that this project is configured to use SSL, not debugging it. So I'm just gonna hit yes. I'm gonna install the certificates, and you can see that the browser has been opened, and now we get the application up and running in a different port number. So this is the local host of weather forecast, and this is the different port, and this is actually running from the container. And also I found a very interesting Visual Studio 2019 plugin this time. So if I just go and stop this guy, and if I go to the extensions and manage extensions, you can see I have installed a new Visual Studio Container Tool extension. This is kind of very interesting, and it is still in preview, but it is very awesome as well. So if you just go to the Google and search for Visual Studio Container extension, you can see it is still in preview stage, and this one has been installed only 7,900 times, which is kind of very recent, I guess. And you can see it does a lot of magical jobs for us. It's pretty much like Visual Studio Code that we saw, but even more intuitive than Visual Studio Code. The reason being, I'm going to show you how it looks like. So I'm just going to close this guy, and I'm going to go to the containers. You can see it is sitting within this particular option, and you can see once I open this, you can see I actually can see all the containers coming in. So let me just make this a little bit bigger. You can see it shows me the adoring Dubinsky, which is nothing but this particular container which is running currently, and amazing Ganguly, which was something that we executed in our last video for the Jenkins. The weather app is the one that I just executed before, which is currently up and running. And this is the ASP core, which is deleted right now. So you can see this one is nothing but the image which is currently running over here. So if you go over here and do a docker ps-a, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 containers is being shown. So it shows the 2 container running, like 15 minutes and 6 minutes. These are the 2 images. The amazing Ganguly has been exited, this one, the Jenkins, and this is the one which we just closed as well, right? So it shows everything for you in a very intuitive GUI manner. And not just that one, it also shows you the ports being exposed, like 80 and 443, these 2 options, and how the host port is been accessing that. You see all these details that we discussed in our last video of how the container port is been exposing the host port. All these informations are now coming in using this super simple plugin that I have installed within my Visual Studio. So basically it's an extension, not plugin. That's how Microsoft Visual Studio 2019 claims. And you can see even the log files of that particular container coming in. Pretty awesome. So you can also stream log if you want to, or if you don't want to stream the log, you can remove that, which I just don't prefer. And if you want to see the files, once I click the files, you can see all these files come so quickly for us, guys. I can directly go to the apps. So this is the app which the container actually has. And now you can see our application weather forecast.fs is currently running over there, which is pretty awesome. So these are nothing but the files sitting within my container. And you can see you are accessing the container as if like something that you are accessing within your local machine. And this is so cool that you can do all these sort of jazz over here. You can also select this images option, which is nothing but the command that we executed, the docker images 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All these images are coming in, but just that only these 2 are the actual images, and these 2 are actually using this guy as a base image to perform the operation, which is our local image. So that's why you can see that it is kind of tagged like this over here. And you can also get the details of this particular image, and also shows you the parent image, which is currently been responsible for this one. So if I go over here, right, this one, you can see the parent image ID is something the same name, right? So you can get all these informations right from this particular extension, which is pretty awesome. You can also stop the container. You can also attach to a process or open a terminal from in here. You can see that I'm directly logged within the container, I can do an ls to see what's really sitting within this particular container. And also I can stop the container. I can even delete or remove this particular container that we were doing in our early discussions. So all these things we can do using this particular super simple container extension in Visual Studio 2019. So that's it, guys. Now you would have gained a complete understanding of how to work with the Docker, at least the basic commands, and how you can build a Docker container and how you can publish that within your own local machine. We have not discussed about publishing the Docker in an AWS or Azure yet, but yes, as you know, we can keep extending this particular video because this Docker, this Kubernetes, this container kind of stuff is kind of very, very vast. But now you should have gained a basic understanding of how to work with Docker and how to create an image, how you can use the toolings of Docker to work with the containers, and how to access the containers and file systems within the Docker. These informations is what exactly you can leverage to understand and work with hosting in a cloud and something like that. All you're going to do is you're going to host this particular running container on Azure or AWS, and then you're going to access those services from within your local machine. That's it. That's the only difference between hosting your container into an hosting provider versus running that into your local machine. But other than that, this is all the Docker about, guys. There are so many other things like Docker Compose, Docker Swarm, Docker with Kubernetes and stuff, but we'll be discussing about that in another video of Weekly. But once again, thank you very much for watching this video and hope you would have gained a lot of information on Docker in this weekend video series. Once again, thank you very much for watching this video and have a great day.